Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 1, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by Splemply on Wattpad. Now let's start. Izuku woke up to the sound of rain hitting his window. He sat up and swung his legs over the makeshift bed, letting his bare feet touch the cold ground. He made his way over to a table that had 2 piles of clothes on it, one for work and one for day-to-day life. After putting on his work clothes, a plain black long-sleeve shirt and breathes, he headed to the bathroom. He made a feeble attempt at taming his unruly hair, but it barely improved. After washing his face and brushing his teeth, he realized he had no food at home. So he skipped breakfast and went to the door, planning to eat at work instead. He slipped on a pair of red shoes, the only pair he wore outside, and grabbed his keys. Locking the door behind him, he checked the time on his phone and cursed himself for being late. While it wasn't too bad, Izuku preferred to have everything ready before the customers arrived. He ran full speed to the cafe where he worked, trying to avoid getting too soaked. He managed to arrive just before the rain intensified. Changing into a pair of dry black shoes he kept at the cafe, he headed to the back. Although the shoes didn't fit comfortably due to his extra toe joint, he had made adjustments. He skipped up the stairs to his boss's apartment and knocked on the door. Hearing a groan, he knew she wouldn't be fully awake yet, so he took out his keyring, which had a copy of her key. Unlocking the door, he stepped inside just in time to dodge a pillow that flew past his head. He entered the room and pulled the blanket off his boss, letting her feel the chill of the early morning. Mai groaned softly into her pillow, finally sitting up and heading to the bathroom while Izuku left her alone. He returned downstairs, put on an apron, and got to work making pastries. Since Mai wasn't the best at baking or making drinks, Izuku usually took charge of that while she handled the business side. That morning, he prepared 3 different kinds of cinnamon rolls, regular, apple, and chocolate, along with croissants, muffins, brownies, and biscuits. Mai had often wondered how he managed to create so many different pastries in one morning, but that remained his secret, just like his recipes. Izuku was still pulling items from the ovens and placing them on display when Mai flipped the sign on the door to indicate that the cafe was open. After a few minutes, he heard the bell and went to greet the customers. It was an elderly couple who were regulars, known for their kindness. They approached the counter, and Izuku took their orders before they settled at their usual table. Familiar with their favorites, he prepared their usual orders without hesitation. Mai loaded a tray with their pastries while Izuku worked on their drinks, 2 flat whites, one with extra sugar and one with extra milk. He suspected they ordered similarly because they wanted to make things easier for him and Mai, which he found sweet. After Mai served them, more customers came in, and he took their orders as well. The cafe was usually slow, never having more than half the tables filled at once, yet they always managed to sell out of everything. Mai was like a mother to Izuku, or perhaps an aunt, considering his actual mother. Regardless, he loved her, and he knew she saw him as a son. If anyone asked why a minor was working at a cafe, she would always say he was her nephew. She understood a bit about his home situation and had allowed him to work under her since he was 7. When the cafe closed, Izuku helped pack everything away before heading home. He immediately went to his desk and pulled out his laptop. It had taken him ages to save up for it, and he had received his phone from Mai shortly after he started working for her, as she worried about him often. He spent a few hours searching for files on villains or street thugs in his area, also looking into other cases and saving everything on a cheap flash drive. Around 9 p.m., he accessed a secret compartment in the floor, retrieving a black t-shirt, black briefs, black sneakers, a dark red hoodie, and a mask. He had crafted his costume himself. While he had bought the main parts, like the clothes and protective pads, a good portion was handmade. He often collected items from a nearby beach that was littered with trash. The mask had a voice filter to disguise his voice, and it was attached to the hood, making it difficult to remove without a special key or code. Izuku also carried various weapons and homemade support items, including knives, glitter bombs, smoke bombs, a collapsible bow staff, and other tools hidden throughout his outfit. He had a utility belt under his jumper filled with medical supplies and pockets for small items. Overall, he was quite pleased with his setup. Once he finished putting on the costume, he snuck out through the window, mostly for fun, and made his way into the city. Although he had a specific territory and patrol route, he sometimes veered off, and this was one of those times. Hearing a scream a few blocks away, he rushed to investigate. A woman was being threatened by a man who appeared to be intoxicated. Izuku approached the alley and greeted the man as if they were old friends. The man, startled, turned to face him and stumbled slightly. Izuku crouched low to dodge a punch aimed at him, then retaliated with a swift kick that sent the man reeling back, incapacitated by his own inebriation. Izuku secured his wrists to a drain pipe with a zip tie before turning to the woman nearby. He urged her to call the police and head home for her safety. As he dashed behind a building to climb the fire escape, he stumbled upon a drag deal in progress. He intervened, using one of the thugs' phones to contact the authorities, as there were no witnesses to the scene. After that, he continued his patrol, encountering 14 more incidents throughout the night. It was surprising that people still ventured into an area where a vigilante was known to patrol. However, no one knew his true identity. Izuku had ensured that only those in his vicinity could discover his vigilante name. He wanted to avoid becoming well-known and facing the same fate as many other vigilantes he had heard about. Thus, the name Oleander remained a closely guarded secret in Mizudafu. The next morning, as Izuku prepared for work, he received a notification on his phone. Curious about what Mai could want at such an early hour, he checked his messages and found he had been added to a new group chat, likely by mistake. The group chat was titled, "A Bunch of Idiots." Several members exchanged greetings, and one member, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐸𝐵𝐸𝐵, seemed to be the one organizing the chat. They quickly realized that one of the participants had been mistakenly included due to a wrong number. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐸𝐵 apologized for the mix-up, and the group decided to keep the newcomer in the chat out of curiosity. In a separate chat, Nizu instructed Yamada to leave the stranger in the group, stating his curiosity as the reason. Yamada questioned the decision, but Nizu insisted on maintaining their anonymity. Back in the original group chat, the newcomer, now referred to as 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸𝐵, expressed surprise at being allowed to stay. The group decided to see how things would unfold, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸𝐵, intrigued, opted to remain. Izuku had to turn off his phone when he arrived at the cafe, slightly late for his shift. He navigated through his daily routine of dodging pillows and baking pastries while pondering the peculiar group chat he had joined. After work, Izuku returned to the chat, feeling guilty about leaving so abruptly. Earlier, he greeted the group and they welcomed him back warmly. The conversation flowed, with members sharing light-hearted banter and getting to know one another better. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐴𝐵𝐸𝐵 initiated a playful exchange, asking 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸𝐵 about their favorite drink, which turned out to be coffee. The group continued to engage in friendly discussions, and 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸𝐵 revealed their admiration for Eraserhead, a hero known for his unique fighting style and preference for working without media attention. As the conversation progressed, 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸 shared their passion for analyzing heroes, boasting about their extensive collection of notebooks filled with detailed observations. The group was captivated by 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸's knowledge and enthusiasm, leading to a lively discussion about their favorite heroes and the intricacies of hero work. Izuku felt a sense of belonging in this odd yet welcoming group, intrigued by the connections forming among them. It felt eerie and unusual. Broccoli Bunny expressed regret for having said anything initially. Ratatouille, however, was impressed and wondered if Broccoli Bunny had an analysis quirk. Broccoli Bunny denied having such a quirk and preferred to keep that information private. Ratatouille seemed intrigued, hinting at a challenge, but reassured Broccoli Bunny that nothing would happen, at least not yet. Curious about Erasure, Broccoli Bunny shared extensive details. Eraserhead was described as a tall, slender man with pale skin and messy, shoulder-length black hair that partially obscured his face. His half-opened black eyes often appeared fatigued, and he typically wore a baggy black outfit, complete with a long-sleeved shirt, matching breathes, and a utility belt. He always had his signature wrap scarf, under which he concealed bright yellow goggles for battle. Before becoming a teacher, Erasure's goggles were silver, and he had a smaller utility belt. During his high school years at 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵𝐸𝐵, His hero outfit consisted of a separate black jacket and breathes, later evolving into a unitard-like appearance. He added goggles to his costume in his second year, which later resembled the ones he wore today. Broccoli Bunny explained Eraser's fighting style, which involved ensnaring and immobilizing opponents with a capturing weapon. This technique took him 6 years to master from scratch and worked well with his Erasure quirk, allowing him to nullify opponents' quirks while restraining them. Eraser was also known for his keen intellect, easily evaluating his students' personalities and mental states. He adeptly combined his equipment and quirk in battle, using his goggles to obscure his line of sight and keep enemies guessing. Eraser's quirk allowed him to nullify another person's quirk just by looking at them, with effects that could last even if he lost sight of the user. However, this powerful ability came with several drawbacks, such as deactivation upon blinking, causing dry eyes, and having no effect on mutant-type quirks or abilities not originating from quirks. Additionally, Eraser's hair would stand on end while his quirk was active, revealing its status to enemies. Broccoli Bunny listed Eraser's equipment, including eye drops for his dry eyes, a capturing weapon made from steel wire alloy, and his recognizable gold goggles. He also had caltrops and a large knife for practical use in combat. After sharing this detailed analysis, Broccoli Bunny wondered if anything was amiss. Ratatouille reassured them that the analysis was perfect. Broccoli Bunny felt a bit odd, as they often received comments about being creepy or weird, leading to a self-deprecating remark about being called a stalker. As the conversation continued, others chimed in, expressing surprise and concern about Ratatouille's reaction. The very sleepy caterpillar, another participant, shared their long-standing admiration for Erasure, which resonated with Broccoli Bunny, who believed everyone should appreciate him as the best hero in Japan. Broccoli Bunny revealed a personal touch, mentioning that they had created their own merchandise for Erasure since there was none available. Their room was filled with handmade posters and cardboard figurines, which others found adorable. They also mentioned creating items for other heroes like Nizu and Power Loader, who were among their favorites. When asked about their interest in support items, Broccoli Bunny shared their hobby of collecting materials from a nearby beach to build things, although they had only made blueprints so far. Mr. Maker offered to help, which thrilled Broccoli Bunny, and the conversation flowed with excitement and camaraderie as they discussed their shared interests and admiration for their favorite heroes. Not only about Erasure, but also where one learns to build things. Broccoli Bunny mentioned that for the second question, they were self-taught. For the first, they had found a couple of 20-second videos that were taken down soon after and had seen the hero in action once or twice. They also hinted at possibly having hacked into UA to access a few student files and training clips, claiming to be good at being unnoticed and that the security system was surprisingly easy to bypass. Ratatouille expressed disbelief, noting that there had been no records of any successful hacks into the school. Broccoli Bunny reassured them that the person responsible for the security system had made it too easy. Mr. Maker seemed concerned, prompting Broccoli Bunny to check on him, to which Ratatouille confirmed he was fine and expressed admiration for Broccoli Bunny's knowledge of heroes and their skills. Broccoli Bunny felt a surge of happiness at the compliment, appreciating that someone liked their efforts. Ratatouille then asked if Broccoli Bunny wanted to be a hero. Broccoli Bunny hesitated, revealing that they used to aspire to that but felt they could no longer pursue that dream. The next morning, Izuku woke up to the discomfort of his injuries from the previous night. Despite having a broken rib and various cuts and bruises, he knew he had to go to work and couldn't leave Mai alone. He was adept at hiding his injuries and prepared himself for the day ahead. After getting ready, he left for work and followed his usual routine, narrowly dodging a pillow thrown at him. He made himself a coffee before rushing to prepare pastries, knowing the coffee would be worth it. Once everything was set up, Mai flipped the sign on the door to indicate they were open. Not long after, the first customer walked in, and Izuku was surprised to see Eraserhead standing at the counter. He struggled to contain his excitement, feeling like a child. The hero requested a black coffee, sounding as if he desperately needed rest. Izuku stuttered in response, eager to fulfill the order. He quickly went to the back to let his small self out for just a moment, as he still needed to prepare the coffee. Following the order precisely, he asked Mai if he could serve the customer this time. Recognizing his enthusiasm, she chuckled and agreed. Izuku managed to act composed as he handed the drink to Eraserhead, who even complimented the coffee. Overwhelmed with joy, Izuku gathered his courage and called out to the hero just before he left, asking for an autograph. Eraserhead seemed slightly confused but agreed, prompting Izuku to retrieve his hero notebook from his bag. He always carried it just in case, and this was the perfect opportunity. After grabbing a pen, he returned to the hero, opened the notebook to an empty page, and handed it over for Eraserhead to sign. When he received it back, Izuku was bursting with happiness. He thanked the hero, who responded casually before leaving. As soon as he was gone, Izuku rushed to his bag, ignoring the pain in his rib, and pulled out his phone to share the news in the group chat. In the chat, Broccoli Bunny excitedly announced that they had met Eraserhead and that he had signed their notebook, expressing their overwhelming joy. Screech urged them to slow down and asked for details. Broccoli Bunny explained that they worked in a cafe and had built up the courage to ask for an autograph, which the hero had granted. Sleep questioned whether they were sure it was the same Eraserhead, to which Broccoli Bunny confidently affirmed, noting that he was in his hero costume, likely just returning from a patrol. Others in the chat agreed with Broccoli Bunny's account, and they promised to send a picture for verification. Meanwhile, in the UA staff group chat, Nizu inquired if Aizawa had really met the hero. Aizawa confirmed it, admitting he hadn't recognized him at first. Nemuri asked if Eraserhead was cute, to which Aizawa responded that he found him adorable. The playful banter continued, with Nemuri and Yamada teasing Aizawa about his feelings, while he insisted he only liked the coffee. The conversation flowed with light-hearted jokes about future possibilities, leaving Aizawa to ponder the unexpected turn of events. He had fluffy green hair and green eyes, appearing around 8 or 9 years old. Nizu expressed surprise at the boy's young age, and Aizawa admitted he was taken aback as well. Nemuri felt a pang of sadness at not being able to see him, adding that if Sho thought he was adorable, he must be truly precious. Aizawa confirmed that he was indeed adorable, recalling how the boy's smile could rival the sun. The emotional reactions from Nemuri, Yamada, and Majima were palpable, but Aizawa dismissed their sentiments with a light-hearted shush. Nemuri insisted that Sho needed to take them to the cafe, and Yamada agreed. Aizawa relented, stating it would only be the two of them, prompting Majima to express his disappointment at not being included, as he wanted to build things with the boy. Nizu reassured everyone that the boy would be around for a while. When Mai opened the cafe the next morning, she was joined by Eraserhead, Midnight, and Present Mike, all in civilian clothes. Izuku felt overwhelmed at the thought of talking to 3 pro heroes, so he asked Mai to take their orders. She agreed, but Izuku sensed she had a plan. He peeked out from the kitchen to observe them, but Midnight spotted his fluffy green curls and smiled, causing him to retreat back into the kitchen. He could still hear their conversation. Midnight asked about him, and Mai explained that he was her nephew who had been working at the cafe for some time. Midnight noted that he seemed shy, and Mai joked that with 3 heroes in one room, he might just climb out a window to escape. Izuku recognized the humor but knew the heroes took it seriously. Mai called out to him, and he poked his head out to nod before retreating again. Midnight giggled as they settled at their table. Mai handed Izuku a piece of paper with their orders, and he quickly got to work on the drinks while she prepared the pastries. Just as they finished, Mai pretended to burn her finger on the coffee machine and rushed off, leaving Izuku to deliver the orders. He picked up the tray and managed to reach their table without incident. However, they turned their attention to him. Midnight asked for his name, and he stammered out a fake name, Teo Izuku, bowing slightly before leaving to avoid further questions. With no other customers around, he retrieved his phone from his bag. In a group chat titled, "A Bunch of Idiots," he shared his predicament about the 3 pro heroes in the cafe. He expressed his nervousness, and his friends encouraged him to talk to them. They reassured him that he had already spoken to Eraserhead the previous day, and he should try again. Despite his doubts, he resolved to ask for autographs and a photo, though he anticipated regrets. Izuku took a deep breath and prepared himself for the conversation. As he stepped out of the kitchen, he noticed the heroes were still engaged in casual conversation. Midnight waved at him, and he approached their table, feeling a mix of anxiety and determination. He mumbled his request for autographs, and present Mike enthusiastically agreed, with Midnight following suit. As they signed his notebook, Izuku felt a rush of excitement. When they finished, Midnight invited him for a photo, and he eagerly accepted, handing her his phone. He beamed as they posed together, with Midnight ruffling his hair before he hurried back to the kitchen. Once inside, he quickly returned to the group chat to share his success. His friends congratulated him, and he proudly noted that Midnight had ruffled his hair. When asked if he still had regrets, he admitted he would always have plenty. His friend Ratatouille playfully threatened to hack into his phone to uncover his secrets, but Izuku confidently asserted that he could keep things hidden, even from Principal Nizu. Ratatouille decided to take a different approach. If he couldn't find the phone, he would find something else. Broccoli Bunny expressed doubt about the outcome, while 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 inquired about the situation. Ratatouille confirmed Broccoli Bunny's suspicion that he wouldn't find much. He then directed 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴𝐵𝐿𝐴 and the very sleepy caterpillar to a second group chat, surprising Broccoli Bunny with the revelation. In the UA staff group chat, Nizu expressed confusion over a particular file. Nemuri asked what he didn't understand, and Nizu explained that the file contained minimal information, only a BRTH certificate. Aizawa was taken aback to learn that there was no BRTH certificate or any medical records or parental information. Nizu began to suspect that this lack of information might be intentional and questioned the reasons behind it. Aizawa shared his concern that the individual might be hiding something and hoped their home situation was alright. Yamada humorously referred to Aizawa as Dadzawa, prompting Aizawa to dismiss him. Nizu noted that the file listed the cafe as the individual's address, suggesting he likely lived with his aunt, who ran the cafe. Aizawa remarked that the apartment above them seemed too small for 2 people, let alone 4. Yamada proposed that the aunt could be fostering or had adopted him. Nizu agreed and instructed the 3 to keep an eye on the individual, emphasizing not to stalk him. After a moment of silence, Izuku decided to check on the hero's table. They had finished their meals, so he grabbed a tray and began collecting empty cups and plates. Eraserhead, the underground hero, broke the silence by asking why Izuku wasn't at school. Izuku explained that he had completed school, opting for online courses because the regular work was too easy. He revealed that he had finished primary, middle, and high school and was now working on a college degree in his spare time. The heroes exchanged incredulous looks, and feeling uncomfortable under their stares, Izuku retreated to the back. In the UA staff group chat, Aizawa informed Nizu about Izuku's schooling. Nizu confirmed that Izuku was indeed correct. He had a high school diploma and was enrolled in an online college course. Nizu also found records of him attending online lectures. Yamada expressed disbelief, noting that Izuku looked around 9 years old, while Nemuri agreed that he seemed too young for such achievements. Nizu pointed out that Izuku's grades in school had been poor, barely passing, but after leaving he had achieved perfect scores in all subjects. Aizawa speculated about the possibility of bad teachers, which Nizu acknowledged. In another group chat, Ratatouille asked Broccoli Bunny if he had an intelligence quirk. Broccoli Bunny denied it but confirmed that he had completed online schooling. When 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴𝐵𝐿𝐴 questioned why he would finish school early, Broccoli Bunny provided 3 reasons. The work was too easy, he needed to help at his aunt's cafe, and he had faced bullying at school. He explained that older kids had bullied him, and the teachers had ignored the situation, even giving him poor grades and blaming him for everything that went wrong. Ratatouille and others expressed concern, but Broccoli Bunny insisted he was fine now and didn't want anyone to get in trouble on his behalf. As the conversation continued, Broccoli Bunny logged off, leaving the others to reflect on the discussion. Later that day, after finishing his shift, Izuku helped clean up before heading home. However, sensing someone watching him, he decided to go to a nearby park instead. This park held memories of playing with his older friend, 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐴𝐵𝐿𝐴, before their friendship soured after Izuku was labeled quirkless. 𝐒𝐮𝐴𝐵𝐿𝐴 and his friends had bullied him, finding amusement in his misfortunes, and things only worsened after Izuku's father passed away and his mother kicked him out. He had since lived in an abandoned apartment. As Izuku sat lost in thought, He heard soft footsteps approaching from behind. His instincts kicked in, and he quickly backflipped off the bench, unintentionally kicking the person behind him in the back of the head. When he turned to see who it was, he realized he had struck Eraserhead. Apologizing profusely, Izuku covered his mouth in shock. Eraserhead, rubbing the back of his head, reassured him that it was fine and admitted he shouldn't have snuck up on him. Izuku wondered how Eraser had known he was there. He explained that he had sensitive hearing, which prompted Eraser to raise an eyebrow and ask if that was a quirk. Izuku shook his head, and Eraser sighed, urging him to come along since it was getting dark and he didn't want Izuku to go home alone. Although curious about Eraser's concern, Izuku nodded and followed him to the cafe. He felt too nervous to speak, grateful that the hero didn't initiate conversation. Upon arriving at the cafe, Izuku unlocked the door with his spare key. After exchanging goodbyes, he sensed that Eraser was still watching the building. He quickly locked up again and made his way to the back of the cafe, where a hidden door led to a dark alley. Dressed in black, he slipped out unnoticed and took the darkest paths home. Fortunately, he didn't encounter anyone near his house. Once inside, Izuku focused on a school report that was overdue and reviewed files on a group called the League of Villains, which seemed to have no identifiable members or information. It was puzzling. As the night wore on, he prepared to head out, grabbing his flash drives. It was Friday, the day he dropped off his week's work at the police station. He climbed through an open window into Detective 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲's office, leaving 7 flash drives neatly on the desk. Just as he was about to leave, the lights turned on, revealing the detective entering with a cup of coffee. Detective 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 greeted him without looking up, and Izuku responded with a gesture as if tipping an imaginary hat. The detective finally acknowledged him, asking about the new files. Izuku pointed out that the information was on the desk, recommending the 7th flash drive first due to a suspicious new villain group. The detective thanked him with a small smile, and Izuku saluted before jumping out the window and onto the next rooftop. He leapt from building to building, searching for anything unusual. To his surprise, the night was quiet, no signs of trouble at all. However, he sensed that he was being followed. Pausing on an empty rooftop, he called out to Eraser, who soon appeared, using his scarf to pull himself over the edge. Eraser asked how Izuku had known it was him, to which Izuku replied that he was the only one who moved so lightly, although he had been half-guessing. Eraser mentioned that he had been instructed to arrest Izuku, but since he had never seen him use his quirk, he wasn't technically a vigilante. Izuku scoffed, torn between feeling relieved and disappointed at not being considered a real vigilante. Eraser suggested he just choose to be happy, as it was easier that way. Their conversation dwindled into silence, and then Izuku took off running. He knew the area well and could easily lose any hero in under a minute. Eraser didn't stand a chance. By 1 in the morning, Izuku called it a night and returned home, knowing he needed to wake up early for his shift at the cafe. Over the next 6 months, Eraser became a regular at the Green Bean Cafe, often arriving shortly after it opened. Sometimes he brought Mike and Midnight, but more often he came alone. Izuku grew more comfortable around them, though he still felt nervous and tried to avoid engaging in conversation. The only challenge was Mai, his boss, who encouraged interaction. Meanwhile, the group chat was thriving, and Izuku quickly became known as the chat's cinnamon roll. It was heartening to know there were people who genuinely wanted to be friends with him rather than hurt him. However, he worried that this would change once they discovered he was quirkless, so he kept that secret as long as he could. One day, after finishing work, he returned to a flurry of messages in the group chat. He must not have noticed since his phone was on silent. A bunch of idiots. Ratatouille wondered if Broccoli Bunny was around. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐬𝐴 informed everyone that Broccoli Bunny was offline. A flurry of messages followed, all tagging Broccoli Bunny, until finally he came online. Broccoli Bunny asked what was going on. Ratatouille reminded him that the UA entrance exam was approaching and inquired if he would be applying. Broccoli Bunny expressed doubt about participating, explaining that he didn't feel the need or longing to join. He mentioned that the only department he might consider was the support department, but he wasn't sure he met the age requirement. He added that the school was filled with pro heroes, and he feared he would faint during the exam. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 asked how much he liked heroes. Broccoli Bunny admitted he liked them a lot. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 questioned why he wasn't considering the hero course. Broccoli Bunny replied that he didn't feel suited for heroism. The very sleepy caterpillar reminded him of a past incident and suggested he would be fine. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 wondered if it was a quirk issue, to which Broccoli Bunny confirmed it was. Ratatouille reassured him that he would be fine regardless of his quirk. Broccoli Bunny expressed that even if he managed to pass the practical exam and complete 3 years of school, he doubted society would accept someone like him as a hero. WhatIf asked why he felt that way, but Broccoli Bunny preferred not to discuss it. The very sleepy caterpillar insisted that they wouldn't judge him based on his quirk. Broccoli Bunny thanked them but remained firm in his decision. Mr. Maker suggested that if Broccoli Bunny preferred the support course, that was perfectly fine. Ratatouille agreed, noting that the support course was still a good option and that he would likely enjoy it. Broccoli Bunny said he would think about it, but with 3 weeks until the exam, he felt unprepared and uncertain about the exam's content. Mr. Maker offered assistance, revealing that he and Ratatouille had a friend in the support course at UA. Broccoli Bunny was surprised but declined the offer, stating he didn't want to cheat his way into UA. 𝐼 found his sentiment sweet, and Ratatouille acknowledged it. When asked about his plans, Broccoli Bunny stated he intended to study, lots of studying. He mentioned needing to build some blueprints for practice. Mr. Maker thought that was a good idea. Ratatouille asked if he was going to try for the exam, and Broccoli Bunny confirmed he would. Everyone cheered him on, wishing him luck and encouraging him to do his best. Ratatouille suggested he could always be an underground hero, but Broccoli Bunny reaffirmed his longing to pursue the support course. As he prepared to leave, Broccoli Bunny noted he had a lot of studying to do. Ratatouille said goodbye, and the others followed suit, each offering their own farewell. After the chat ended, Broccoli Bunny logged off, leaving 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 and 𝐼 to speculate about the nickname the very sleepy caterpillar had given him. Izuku woke up and checked the time on his phone, ensuring he hadn't overslept. He quickly got out of bed, feeling the urgency of the moment. Applicants were supposed to wear their middle school uniforms, but since Izuku had never attended middle school, he opted for his work clothes. He knew he could bring a change of clothes for the practical exam, so he chose a sleeveless black shirt and black briefs, packing them into his yellow bag. After confirming he had everything, he left the abandoned building and headed toward the school. He had informed Mai about the exam, allowing her to notify others that the cafe would be closed that day. Upon arriving at the school, Izuku stood before the grand entrance, staring at the letters 𝐻 that adorned the massive arch. A pink-haired girl with unique pupils approached him, her excitement evident in her sparkling eyes. She asked if he was nervous, and Izuku admitted he was. She smiled and walked off into the school grounds, leaving Izuku to wonder why she hadn't questioned his age. As an 11-year-old, Izuku was shorter than most and often appeared younger, which might have raised questions in a high school setting. He smiled inwardly, appreciating her lack of curiosity. He carefully navigated through the crowd, making his way to a large room designated for the written exam. After receiving a small piece of paper with his details, he took a seat corresponding to his ticket number. The room filled with examinees from the hero course, general education course, and support course, creating a bustling atmosphere. While he contemplated the other candidates, Present Mike took the stage at the front of the room, using his quirk to ensure everyone could hear him. He welcomed the examinees to the UA entrance exam, encouraging them to respond. Izuku considered joining in but decided against drawing attention to himself. Present Mike continued, announcing that ectoplasm would distribute the exam papers, which were worth 100 marks each. He informed them they had 3 hours to complete the exam and would need to submit their papers as is if they couldn't finish in time. The excitement in the room was palpable as the exam was about to begin. "Are there any questions?" A boy with navy hair and a cream-colored uniform raised his hand. "Yes, examinee 7709. He stood up as a spotlight illuminated him, speaking loudly and clearly. He pointed towards Izuku, who was sitting quietly. "You said the papers have 100 marks, but the information given to us beforehand said there were only 90 questions. For a school as esteemed as yours, this is a terrible mistake. And you, with the curly green hair. You look way too young to be taking this exam. If you are here for fun, please leave. Izuku shrank down in his seat as hundreds of eyes turned toward him. So much for going unnoticed. Alright. The boy there has permission to take this exam and he is an official examinee, so he is fine. To answer your other question, the last question counts for 10 marks. It is a question that requires details, so it is more than 1 mark. I'm sorry, and thank you for clearing that up. The boy bowed deeply before sitting down again as Present Mike asked if there were any other questions. When no one replied, he took a seat on a chair on the stage, and silence fell over the large room once more. As the pro-hero spoke, Ectoplasm and his clones walked around the room, handing out stapled papers to everyone. Izuku struggled to contain his excitement but managed to keep it in check. Ectoplasm paused in front of him for a moment longer than anyone else, but Izuku dismissed it, attributing it to his younger appearance. Looking down at the sheet he received, Izuku found the questions to be much easier than he had anticipated. Having already finished high school, he expected more of a challenge. The last question was his favorite: write an analysis on a hero you like. Izuku wrote down the same thoughts he had shared in a group chat a while back. After about half an hour, he double-checked his answers before getting out of his seat. He made sure to go unnoticed as he slipped to the front of the room and placed his exam on the table next to Mike. Unsure of what to do next, he tapped the pro's shoulder to ask, Present Mike-san. Izuku spoke nervously. Oh, done already? Mike turned to face him, looking a bit confused but not asking any further questions as he took the paper. Yes. I was wondering, what do I do now? You've double-checked your answers. The hero flipped the sheet over, briefly scanning the neatly written responses. Triple-checked. Well then, you're free to go. You can either head to your next exam or go outside into the gardens for the next 2.5 hours. Just make sure you're back in time for your next exam since there's only a 10-minute break in between, Mike said, giving him a thumbs up as he set the paper down. Alright, bye, Present Mike-san. See ya, little listener. Izuku left the room and headed to the gardens. It was peaceful and calming there. With nothing else to do, he pulled out his phone. A bunch of idiots, Broccoli Bunny. I've finished the written exam and now I have nothing to do. Broccoli Bunny. Anyone have anything interesting or important to talk about? The very sleepy caterpillar. Wait a second, how long did it take you to finish the exam? Broccoli Bunny. Around 30 minutes. I give sleep. Isn't the UA entrance exam the hardest in Japan? Broccoli Bunny. To be honest, I expected it to be way harder than it was. Broccoli Bunny. Nizu really needs to make it harder. Ratatouille. My friend told me about that exam, and if Nizu made it any harder, nobody would pass. Broccoli Bunny. Still too easy though. Mr. Maker, you know you could have requested a harder test for extra credit, right? Broccoli Bunny. No, I did not. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, seriously. Broccoli Bunny, nobody told me we could do that before. Ratatouille, well, what's done is done. Broccoli Bunny. Okay, back to the original question. Broccoli Bunny, anyone got anything interesting to talk about? I give sleep. Nope. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐽𝐽, sorry kid. Ratatouille, unfortunately no. Number 47, I got nothing. Stormtrooper, no. Gimme rice, don't look at me. Mr. Maker, I have something. Broccoli Bunny, what is it? Mr. Maker, support item I built. Broccoli Bunny, ooh, do tell. 𝐒𝐮𝐽𝐽, please don't get him started. Number 47, this will go on for hours, I have sleep. Bunny, what have you done? Broccoli Bunny, too late. Broccoli Bunny, Mr. Maker, please go on. Mr. Maker, where do I even begin? 2 hours later, Mr. Maker, then I welded it all together. Broccoli Bunny, wouldn't that make it explode? Mr. Maker. Mr. Maker, now I have to rebuild the whole thing. Broccoli Bunny, I can help you if you want. Mr. Maker, that would be amazing. Thank you. Broccoli Bunny, I need to go to my next exam now, but I'll message you guys afterward. Bye. Broccoli Bunny is offline. Izuku stuffed his phone into his bag before heading to the changing rooms. He wanted to get there before anyone else to avoid conversation, and luck was on his side since he didn't see a single person. He changed quickly and then made his way to the next room, relieved that he wouldn't have to interact with others just yet. The setup was similar to the last one, but each person had a station with supplies and equipment. This would be fun. There were 3 other people already present besides Izuku, Eraserhead, Power Loader, and the pink-haired girl he had encountered that morning. The first 2 were at the front of the room, while the girl waited at her own station, fidgeting with her hands and glancing at the items around her workspace. Izuku assumed she was excited to get to work. He felt the same excitement, but when he reached his workspace, he encountered a small problem. He was too short. With the height of a 9-year-old, the benches designed for 15-year-olds were not the best fit. He could still work, but it would be uncomfortable, and he knew he wouldn't be able to perform at his best if he could hardly see what he was doing. Sighing, he made his way to the front of the room, standing next to Eraserhead and waiting for the man to notice him. The older man stood with his eyes closed, clearly exhausted. If it weren't for his slightly unsteady breathing, Izuku might have thought he was asleep on his feet. Surprised that he wasn't noticed, Izuku gently tapped the man's shoulder. Erasure turned to him, momentarily startled, but quickly composed himself. Izuku explained that he was too short for the benches. Power Loader, who was nearby, chimed in, offering a step stool from the other room. Izuku gratefully accepted the stool and felt a bit embarrassed as he returned to his workspace. Soon after, other examinees filed in, taking their places. The exam began shortly after with Power Loader explaining the rules. The room was smaller and quieter, so he didn't need a microphone to be heard. Power Loader announced that they had 3 hours to design and build their own support items, emphasizing the importance of choosing a hero and considering various factors like durability and functionality. With the time set, Izuku quickly grabbed some blueprints and a pencil, hopping onto his step stool to begin his work. He ignored the snickering from the person next to him, focusing on his favorite hero. Using his knowledge of Eraser's quirk, fighting style, and costume, Izuku decided to address the issue of dry eyes. He considered creating better quality eye drops or a new pair of goggles, ultimately opting for the latter since Erasure used goggles in combat more frequently. As he designed the goggles, Izuku faced a challenge. His quirk could only filter through certain materials. Glass could work, but if it shattered, it could cause harm. Plastic was too weak, and anything clear would defeat the purpose of wearing goggles. He recalled the material he used for his own goggles, which allowed him to see while keeping his face hidden, and found a sheet of it in a cabinet. Next, he focused on the frames, which needed to allow airflow and incorporate tiny pumps to keep Eraser's eyes moist. Striking a balance between functionality and bulkiness was crucial, so he selected a strong metal for the mechanics, even if he couldn't recall its name at the moment. Izuku designed the goggles to resemble Eraser's original pair, maintaining the same framework but adding gold lines over the transparent material to conceal his eyes. When he finished, the goggles looked similar to the originals but offered better protection for both his eyes and the dry eye condition. With 15 minutes left, he quickly tested them to ensure they functioned properly, relieved when they worked as intended. As time was called, Power Loader instructed everyone to step back from their stations. Izuku managed to navigate the stool and watched as Power Loader and Erasure called up examinees one by one to present their inventions. He felt a pang of regret for not anticipating this moment, especially since he had chosen Erasure as his focus. When his name was called, Izuku walked to the front of the room, standing beside the heroes. He explained that he had created a pair of goggles for Eraserhead. He noted the issues with dry eyes and how the original goggles made visibility difficult. He detailed the differences in materials and design, highlighting the built-in pumps for moisture and the vents to prevent fogging. The transparent part was made of a special material that allowed the wearer to see while keeping their eyes hidden, and it was sturdier than the originals, providing better protection. After his presentation, he bowed and awaited the next part. Power Loader encouraged questions from the audience. A few hands shot up, and Power Loader selected one at random. The examinee asked about the goggles' performance in winter, wondering if the water would freeze. Izuku confidently explained that as long as the water was in motion, it would not freeze. Izuku felt a mix of nerves and excitement as he stood before the crowd. He cursed the voice crack that betrayed his anxiety while presenting his invention. Power Loader gestured toward the next person in line, prompting a question about the durability of Izuku's materials. He explained that they should withstand more than his current goggles, though he hadn't tested that theory yet. He chose to overlook the fact that assisting in creating support items without a license was against the rules. As the questions continued, a pink-haired girl asked if he would consider working with her at Hatsum Industries after graduation. This unexpected inquiry caught him off guard, and after a moment, he politely declined, stating he had his own plans. She accepted his answer and returned to her seat. With no further questions, Izuku returned to his station as the exam continued. He noticed the girl's emotional struggle as she had to leave her creation behind, and soon after, all examinees exited the room. On his way home, Izuku spotted some fellow hero course examinees. He felt a pang of sympathy for a girl with short brown hair, her body wrapped in bandages and limping, as a navy-haired boy assisted her. Though he wanted to approach them, he decided against it and continued on his way. Once home, Izuku flopped onto a pile of old blankets and pillows he called his bed, quickly drifting into a long nap. He awoke around 3 and pulled out his laptop to work on an assignment for his online college course, followed by research on local villains and gangs. He knew he might have to drop out of his online courses, so he wanted to maximize his efforts while he could. Later that night, he changed into his vigilante costume and followed his usual routine of catching criminals and evading Eraserhead. In another part of town, Mai bounded down the stairs and entered the cafe where Izuku was. She emerged from the kitchen with a box, placing it on the table as she sat down. Curious, Izuku reached out to touch it, but Mai playfully swatted his hand away, insisting he wait until after he opened the letter she was excited about. With anticipation building, Izuku finally opened the letter. A disc fell out, lighting up to project a video of Nizu, who congratulated him on achieving full marks on the written exam, a feat never before accomplished. He also welcomed Izuku to the support academy, noting his impressive performance in the practical exam. Overwhelmed with emotion, Izuku nearly cried as Mai hugged him and revealed the contents of the box, a small cake adorned with the UA logo. She celebrated the moment with confetti, and they quickly devoured the delicious vanilla sponge cake filled with strawberries and cream. After thanking Mai, Izuku returned to the back to prepare pastries while she cleaned up, taking a moment to message his friends in a group chat. In the chat, excitement erupted as he announced his acceptance into UA. His friends congratulated him, expressing their pride and encouragement. Izuku felt a surge of happiness as he read their supportive messages. Meanwhile, in the UA staff group chat, Yamada inquired about Izuku's acceptance, curious about his quirk. Nizu confirmed the news but kept the details under wraps, stating that only he and Majima, Izuku's teacher, needed to know. As Izuku finished his pastries and displayed them just in time for the cafe's opening, he wasn't surprised to see Eraserhead, Present Mike, and Midnight among the first customers. Still feeling a bit nervous, Izuku leaned on his forearms at the counter, looking up at the customers with his usual customer service smile. Midnight answered his greeting with a smile of her own, asking for their usual order. Izuku happily agreed and went to the back to prepare their food while they took their seats. As he served them, Erasure began to speak. He mentioned seeing Izuku at the entrance exam and asked if he had gotten into UA. Izuku confirmed that he had passed the written exam and placed second in the practical. Erasure complimented his invention, which made Izuku feel proud. Present Mike, curious about what Izuku had created, leaned closer to Erasure, who revealed that Izuku had made him a new pair of goggles. Izuku felt a blush creep onto his cheeks as he realized he had drawn their attention. He hurried off to the kitchen, feeling a bit flustered. He could hear them chatting but couldn't make out the words. When the doorbell rang again, he greeted the next customer and continued with his morning routine. After the heroes finished their meals, Izuku brought out a tray to collect their dishes. Present Mike initiated another conversation, asking about Izuku's quirk. Izuku hesitated, deciding he wasn't ready to share that information yet, and simply muttered that he would rather not say. He took the dishes to the kitchen and felt relieved when the heroes left the cafe to continue their day. Izuku woke up earlier than usual the next day to prepare for school. He put on his uniform and attempted to tame his hair before packing his school bag. He made sure to stop by the cafe to bake pastries, not wanting Mai to have to close just so he could attend school. After preparing his usual foods, he headed off to class. As he walked through the halls, he tried to remain unnoticed. Upon entering the classroom, he smiled at the sight of all the equipment. Although there was a separate room for building, there was still plenty of gear available. He quietly made his way to his desk at the front of the class, where he had been seated due to his height. Fortunately, no one paid him much attention as more students entered. The bell rang, and Power Loader walked in, introducing himself as 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵, the homeroom and support class teacher. The students greeted him in unison. 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵 announced that they would play an icebreaker game to get to know each other before orientation. Some students groaned, and Izuku felt his anxiety rise at the thought of interacting with others, especially since most were older than him. 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵 explained the game, where each student would receive a sheet with boxes to fill by finding classmates who matched the descriptions. Once the papers were handed out, the game began. Izuku hopped off his seat, looking for someone to interact with, but everyone seemed busy chatting. Eventually, he spotted a girl sitting at her desk nearby. She had silky dark ginger hair in a fluffy pixie cut and bright blue eyes that captivated him. Her fair skin was dotted with freckles, and she maintained perfect posture while appearing calm and relaxed. Sunlight filtered through the window, making her eyes shimmer like drops of blue ink. Izuku approached her desk, feeling drawn to her quiet demeanor. After a moment, she looked down at him, their eyes meeting. He placed his paper on her desk, tilting his head slightly. She smiled gently, picked up her pen, and signed the "Born in Another Country" box. Curious, she asked about his sheet, and he quickly signed the "Like Sweets" box. He found her voice to be velvety and kind, and their brief interaction felt warm. Afterward, he moved on to ask others in the class, while she got up to do the same. The game continued until 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵 announced that 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐬𝐵 had completed her sheet. The game was now over, and the teacher instructed the students to place their papers on his desk before lining up outside in 2 straight lines, one for girls and one for boys. The students quickly complied, handing in their sheets and forming the lines. Izuku chose to stand at the back. They followed 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵-sensei to a large outdoor area filled with seats and a stage at the front. Each row of chairs had a sign indicating a different class, and they found WhatIf, taking their seats among the other classes. Principal Nizu walked onto the stage once everyone was seated and stood at a small podium. He welcomed the first-year students to UA High School, expressing hope that they would receive the best education possible and grow into their best selves during their time there. He proceeded to explain the policies, rules, and expectations at UA. After an hour and a half of detailed explanations, he concluded the assembly and instructed the students to leave with their teachers, starting with Class 1A. However, Class 1A was not present. The confusion was brief, and Nizu quickly called for Class 1B to leave first instead. Izuku and his classmates waited until their class was called and departed with 𝐻𝐬𝐬𝐵-sensei. They began their orientation, and he showed them around the school. They returned to the classroom about 10 minutes before lunch, allowing for some free time to chat. Izuku remained in his seat, hoping to avoid social interactions, but his plan was interrupted when a ginger girl approached him. She introduced herself as 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐬𝐵, leaning against his desk with a friendly smile. Izuku introduced himself as Teo Izuku, extending his hand for a shake. He noticed the contrast between his calloused hands and her soft ones. Takara then asked if he wanted to sit together at lunch, to which Izuku readily agreed. As the bell rang, they left the room and walked to the cafeteria together, joining the long line. The cafeteria was bustling with students, and they took their time, resulting in a lot of people getting ahead of them. Once they finally obtained their food, they hurried to find an empty table, managing to secure seats. Just in time. Izuku remarked on their tardiness, grateful for Takara's initiative to start a conversation, as he was feeling overwhelmed by the crowd. She admitted that she wasn't much of a people person either, and they both shared a laugh about the situation. They expressed their appreciation for the food and began to eat. Izuku had katsudon with a small bowl of fruit, while Takara enjoyed a bowl of soup and a plate of vegetables. They paused to savor their first bites, both pleasantly surprised by the quality of the meals. Takara leaned back in her seat, covering her mouth as she expressed her approval. Izuku agreed, noting that even the cafeteria staff seemed to be professionals. Their conversation flowed easily, and soon they found themselves discussing heroes, which was one of Izuku's favorite topics. Takara asked who his favorite hero was, and without hesitation he replied that it was Eraserhead. She was intrigued and wanted to know more about him. Izuku explained that Eraserhead was an underground hero with the ability to erase others' quirks and had a unique fighting style that allowed him to fight effectively without relying on quirks. Curious about the support items Eraserhead might use, Takara listened intently as Izuku shared his thoughts. He mentioned the goggles he had designed for the entrance exam, which were intended to help Eraserhead with his dry eyes. Takara was impressed and asked how he had gathered such information about the hero. Izuku admitted that he had a hobby of analyzing heroes and their quirks, which he hoped would not scare her away. After a moment of consideration, Takara responded positively, finding his interest in heroes cool. Relieved, Izuku continued to share his thoughts, and they moved on to other topics. By the time lunch ended, Izuku realized he had barely eaten, too engaged in conversation, while Takara had finished her meal just in time. He noticed her polite habits, such as covering her mouth while chewing and not speaking with food in her mouth, which he found endearing. Life was good. In Izuku's second week of school, he was called to Principal 𝐒𝐻𝐻's office just after lunch. Unsure of the reason, he felt a twinge of unease but decided to comply, leaving the classroom with 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼-sensei's permission and making his way through the halls. Upon reaching the large doors of the office, he noticed another person waiting there. Curiosity piqued, he greeted her. The pink-haired girl recognized him and excitedly pointed out that he was the one from the support class who had created the impressive goggles for the entrance exam. Teo Izuku introduced himself, feeling a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He recognized 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼 as the girl who had inquired about him joining her company after school. She smiled brightly, leaning closer to him, her height making him feel slightly dwarfed. Her intense gaze, as if she were evaluating him like a potential invention, made him a bit uneasy. Fortunately, the office doors opened, revealing 𝐒𝐻𝐻 seated at his desk, observing them with interest. 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼 straightened up and turned to face him, while Izuku felt a wave of relief wash over him. 𝐒𝐻𝐻 welcomed them in, gesturing toward the chairs in front of his desk. They entered, and the doors closed automatically behind them. Izuku exchanged a glance with 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼, who seemed eager, and he shrugged before they took their seats. 𝐒𝐻𝐻 wasted no time getting to the point. He proposed that they join Class 1A at USJ the following week, suggesting it would be an excellent opportunity to test their inventions in various environments. He explained that the timing was perfect since it was the only time the facility was available. Despite his friendly demeanor, Izuku sensed a calculating glint in 𝐒𝐻𝐻's eyes. Izuku questioned why they were chosen for this opportunity, feeling a mix of intrigue and caution. He knew 𝐒𝐻𝐻 was not one to put students in danger without reason, but he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this invitation than met the eye. 𝐒𝐻𝐻 explained that both of them possessed inventing and machinery skills beyond their current level, and he thought they might enjoy the experience, given their apparent boredom with the support lessons. He took a sip of his tea, setting the cup down with a soft clink. Izuku pondered the offer further, suspecting there was an underlying motive. What could 𝐒𝐻𝐻 gain from having two support corps students join a hero class? Perhaps it was simply for his amusement. He would never intentionally harm a student, but he certainly enjoyed orchestrating events for his own entertainment. Izuku recalled a recent incident involving 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼-sensei, who had complained about Eraserhead being upset over his missing coffee. Only one person had the audacity to take it. With a sense of determination, Izuku decided to accept the offer. He kept his gaze fixed on 𝐒𝐻𝐻, who grinned in response, a sign that this might not be the best decision. 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐵𝐺𝐼, filled with excitement, eagerly agreed as well, her enthusiasm bubbling over like a child on Christmas morning. 𝐒𝐻𝐻 instructed them to skip their morning classes the following Wednesday and head straight to the bus waiting at UA's entrance, where they would ride with Class 1A and Eraserhead to the facility. He warned them that if they were late, they would miss the trip and have to attend regular classes instead. Both students acknowledged his instructions, one more serious than the other, but both filled with anticipation. After the meeting, They exited the office, bowing respectfully before leaving. As the doors closed behind them, Izuku caught a glimpse of 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿, who appeared quite pleased with himself, leaving him with a sense of unease. They parted ways, and Izuku hurried to his support class, arriving just in time. He entered quietly and took his seat next to Kara. The class proceeded as usual, but Izuku was excited to work on his own support items rather than the simplified versions the rest of the class was doing. In his eagerness, he nearly caused a small mishap, but thankfully, no one noticed as he continued working in silence, muttering to himself occasionally. On his way to school the next day, Izuku felt a familiar sense of nervousness, as if something significant was about to happen. His instincts were on high alert, sensing an underlying danger he couldn't quite identify. Before he could dwell on it, he noticed 𝐻𝐻𝐿 leaning down next to him, startling him. He nearly dropped a knife hidden in his uniform pocket, surprised by her sudden presence. She appeared behind him so suddenly that it felt as if she had materialized out of thin air. Izuku forced himself not to reach for his hidden gadgets, trying to keep his secrets safe while at school. She giggled, clearly amused by his startled reaction, and it was evident that she felt no remorse for startling him. Izuku sighed and ran a hand through his messy green curls, acknowledging his jumpiness. He mentioned that classes wouldn't start for another 10 minutes and suggested they grab some support items from the workshop. She eagerly agreed, expressing her disappointment over forgetting some of her inventions the previous day, which she was eager to test. Izuku had grown accustomed to her quirky habit of referring to her machines as babies. She was certainly unique, but her inventive skills were impressive, and he had been trying to convince himself of that to avoid feeling overwhelmed whenever he saw her. They hurried to the workshop, hoping to arrive before the other students. Izuku had a box filled with spare parts and machines he had built over the past few weeks, while 𝐻𝐻𝐿 had a growing pile in the corner that seemed to expand daily. He asked her how many items she planned to take, and she explained that she was limited by the size of the bag given to her by 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿-sensei. Izuku glanced at her pile again and mumbled that the teacher had a point. She didn't hear him, and soon they left with bags filled with their inventions. They rushed to catch the bus, barely making it in time. Feeling a bit anxious, Izuku hid behind 𝐻𝐻𝐿, which was somewhat embarrassing, but his small stature made it easy for him to go unnoticed. However, Eraserhead, their teacher, did notice him. Standing beside the door with Izuku and 𝐻𝐻𝐿 as the other students boarded the bus, Izuku felt uneasy under the pro-hero's gaze. Once everyone was on board, 𝐻𝐻𝐿 hopped on, and Eraserhead placed a hand on Izuku's shoulder. He suggested that interacting with the other students could be beneficial, noting that making friends would help him in his role, which often involved communication. Izuku admitted he felt nervous, and Eraserhead seemed satisfied with his response, allowing him to walk behind him until he sat next to 𝐻𝐻𝐿. Positioned by the window, Izuku felt somewhat concealed by their belongings, hoping that only those directly behind him could see him. As Eraserhead started the bus and it rumbled to life, they drove past the school gates and onto a road lined with trees. Two students behind Izuku, a blonde boy with a black streak in his hair and a girl with pink hair and skin adorned with small horns, became curious and leaned over the seat to catch a glimpse of his green curls. Izuku looked up at them, curiosity evident on his face. The pink-haired girl cooed at him, exclaiming how cute he was, while the blonde boy rested his forearm on the seat, his chin resting on his arm as he gazed down at Izuku, his fingers twitching with the urge to touch his curls. Several other students attempted to peek at him, but 𝐻𝐻𝐿 and the seat shielded him from view. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 explained that they were testing inventions at USJ, emphasizing how the varied terrain would be ideal for different scenarios. She seemed unfazed by the attention they were giving Izuku. He felt compelled to clarify that he was not cute or little, his small frown resembling a pout. The blonde boy teased him, suggesting he look in a mirror, and playfully pinched Izuku's cheek. Although it didn't hurt, Izuku didn't appreciate the touch and rubbed his cheek afterward. The pink-haired girl found his frustration adorable, further fueling the teasing. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 chuckled and intervened, coming to his rescue as the two students leaned back in their seats, leaving him momentarily alone. Izuku could hear whispers from behind him, but he couldn't quite make out the words. Suddenly, the pink-haired girl called out to their teacher, requesting a seat swap due to the cold. Izuku sensed her intention, and Eraserhead's small grin in the mirror indicated he understood too. "Sure thing, Ishido," he replied. Izuku mentally groaned as the two students got up, shuffling around before new ones settled into their seats. He looked up to see a girl with round cheeks and short brown hair, whom he guessed was Uraraka, and a boy with sharp teeth and red hair, likely Kirishima. They looked down at him with expressions similar to those of Ishido. Uraraka whispered excitedly, confirming Ishido's earlier claim about his cuteness. "Those curls look so soft," Eraserhead remarked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Izuku shot a playful glare at his teacher, though it lacked any real malice. It was a light-hearted threat, one he had no intention of following through on. Erasure, aware of this, simply smirked while keeping his eyes on the road. "Sure, problem child. But if you do, I might just wither away from coffee withdrawal," he replied, his usual exhaustion creeping back into his expression. Kirishima, caught off guard, blinked in disbelief. "Wait, you can make Aizawa-sensei a coffee he actually enjoys." "Not telling," Erasure teased, enjoying the banter. "Man, how did you even get him to drink it?" Kirishima pressed. "Again, not telling," Erasure replied, his tone playful. The conversation shifted as the students began to comment on how cute Izuku was, swapping seats and giggling amongst themselves. Erasure didn't intervene. He likely thought Izuku was making friends, or simply enjoyed watching him squirm. The next pair of students, an invisible girl named Hagakure and a girl with a black ponytail called Yaoyorozu, joined in. "How adorable!" Yaoyorozu exclaimed, covering her mouth in delight. "I know. I didn't know it was possible to be this cute," Hagakure added. "I'm not adorable. Why does everyone keep saying that?" Izuku protested, crossing his arms and shooting them a mock glare that lacked any real seriousness. "Because you are." Ishido chimed in from her seat. "She's not entirely wrong, you know," Hatsum mused thoughtfully. "What's an 11-year-old doing here, though, Aizawa-sensei?" "He's at least 4 years younger than us," Yaoyorozu questioned, glancing at their teacher with mild confusion. "Because he passed the entrance exam," Erasure explained. "He even ranked first in the written exam, outshining students from other departments." The bus fell silent as the other students processed this information, bewildered by the fact that an 11-year-old had outperformed them in a high school test. "Really?" Hagakure asked, her voice filled with surprise. "Yeah," Izuku replied, a hint of pride in his tone. "I've done online courses and legally finished high school. I'm currently working on a college degree." The bus remained quiet as Izuku and Erasure shared a smile, enjoying the moment of silence. Eventually, the chatter resumed. "So, what's your name, little guy?" Hagakure asked, resting her cheek in her palm, though it was hard for Izuku to tell in her hero costume. "Teo Izuku," he replied. A voice from the back of the bus suddenly exclaimed in shock, and Izuku felt a rush of anxiety. He recognized the voice, and it made him sink lower in his seat, wishing he could disappear. "But Kugo, you shouldn't swear around a kid," came a gentle reprimand. Izuku flinched at the mention of Kaken, panic flooding his thoughts. He wished to avoid any confrontation, knowing that one look from Kaken could reveal his identity. Hardly anyone knew his past, and he had kept his true identity hidden, even from Mai. It had been a while since Kaken had last seen him, and Izuku hoped that time had changed things enough for him to remain unnoticed. He still had the same green curls, freckles, and emerald eyes, and his expressions hadn't changed much either. Concerned looks from Hatsum, Yaoyorozu, and Hagakure, though he couldn't see Hagakure's face, made Izuku feel even more anxious. "Hey Teo, are you alright?" Yaoyorozu asked quietly. Izuku nodded, not wanting to worry them, and the rest of the trip continued in silence. When the bus finally arrived at the building, Izuku regretted accepting Nizu's offer. He had not anticipated having to interact with the other students, especially Kaken. As he stepped off the bus, he sighed at the thought of facing him. Hatsum and Erasure followed closely behind, while the rest of the students trailed not far behind. Izuku kept himself hidden behind Hatsum, staying near the back of the group as they approached the dome-shaped building. Waiting at the entrance. was another pro hero, and Izuku barely managed to contain his excitement. Oh my gosh! It's 13. She's in my top 10. Her black hole quirk is so cool, he exclaimed, realizing too late that he had spoken his thoughts aloud. Kirishima stared at him, surprised, but 13 began her introduction before anyone could ask questions. Welcome to the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ, she announced, explaining the building and quirk safety as they entered. However, in the middle of her explanation, Izuku froze as he noticed something in the plaza. A smoky purple portal opened, and figures began to emerge. Hey, they even have fake villains, Kirishima called out, but both teachers tensed at the sight of nearly 100 villains gathering. Get back! 13 shouted, urging everyone to huddle together as Erasure prepared for a confrontation. Stay here, he instructed them. Wait, Eraserhead's fighting style is to sneak up and surprise a single person. They all know you're coming and there are at least 70 of them. Izuku argued, his concern evident. Don't worry, a hero always has more than one trick up his sleeve, Erasure assured them before leaping down the stairs to engage the first group of villains. They fell to the ground as he swiftly moved on to the next group, ready to protect his students. He was doing pretty well. Most of the villains were low level, but 3 stood out as genuinely dangerous. One had blue hair with hands all over his body, another wore a bartender outfit and was shrouded in a purple-black mist, and the last was a massive figure with an exposed brain and a bird-like face, towering over All Might. Izuku watched as Erasure took down another group of villains while the mist-covered villain vanished and reappeared behind the students, blocking their escape. He introduced himself as a member of the League of Villains, declaring their intent to eliminate All Might and threatening to scatter and torment the heroes in training. Kaken and Kirishima attempted to attack simultaneously, just as 13 prepared to use her black hole quirk. Kaken shouted defiantly, questioning if the villains thought they could defeat them. Suddenly, they were enveloped in black mist, and Izuku clung to 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸, shutting his eyes tightly, wishing for the day to end. When he opened them again, he found himself surrounded by water. Fortunately, his inventions were waterproof. Izuku and 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸 attempted to swim to the surface, but a villain with a shark-like quirk approached them with alarming speed. Just as the villain reached for the students, he received a swift kick to the face, and Izuku and 𝐒𝐻𝐮𝐸𝐸 were pulled to safety by Azui's tongue, landing on the fake ship in the shipwreck zone. Once they were safe, they quickly brainstormed a plan to escape, realizing they were being surrounded by villains with water-based quirks. Izuku asked 𝐒𝐻𝐮𝐸𝐸 about her inventions, and she emptied her backpack onto the floor for him to sift through. He then turned to Azui, asking her to detail her quirk. She explained her abilities, including wall climbing, high jumps, and her long tongue, which could extend up to 20 meters. She could also store items in her stomach and secrete a mild toxin. Izuku noted everything as he found the invention he needed from 𝐒𝐻𝐮𝐸𝐸's bag, along with one of his own, and a plan began to form in his mind. He quickly shared his strategy, handing 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸 a special gun and putting on a glove before leaning against the wall, pushing off, and jumping onto the railing, leaping off the ship. As he soared above the villain-filled water, he activated the glove and flicked it toward the water, unleashing a massive shockwave. The recoil made him grip his wrist, as the glove was designed for an adult, propelling him higher into the air. The shockwave hit the water, creating a whirlpool that pulled every villain toward its center. Azui grabbed 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸 and jumped off the ship, catching Izuku with her tongue while 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸 fired sticky ball from the gun to keep the villains together. They swam to the edge of the water just in time to witness Erasure being slammed into the concrete floor by the bird-faced villain. The trio looked across the plaza as Erasure struggled against the villain, who laughed about the strength of the 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸, designed specifically to defeat All Might, with or without quirks. Erasure attempted to erase the 𝐻𝐻𝐸𝐸's quirk again, but the villain retaliated, causing Erasure to cry out in pain as his arms were broken. Izuku felt a wave of helplessness wash over him, wanting to look away but unable to tear his gaze from the scene. He watched as Erasure's face contorted in anguish, blood staining his features. The black mist villain appeared silently beside the hand-covered villain, and Izuku forced himself to focus on them instead of the injured pro hero. The mist villain, Shigaraki Tamura, mentioned that one of the students had escaped to alert the other heroes and suggested they leave. However, the hand-covered villain insisted that they stay to wound All Might's pride by targeting his students. He locked eyes with Izuku, sending a shiver down his spine with his unsettling smile. The villain declared his intent to start with Izuku and charged at him with incredible speed, reaching out to touch his face. Izuku pushed down his fear, determined to protect himself and his friends. Realizing the villain's quirk likely involved his hands, Izuku seized the moment. As the villain got close, he grabbed his wrist, yanking him off balance and throwing him into the water. The villain struggled to stand, but Izuku was already on him, delivering a kick to his gut and an elbow to his chin. The impact rattled the villain, causing him to fall to his knees in a daze. Izuku followed up with another elbow strike, hearing a satisfying crack as it connected. Shigaraki clutched his ribs and quickly made his way to the edge of the water, pulling himself out onto dry land. Izuku followed, struggling a bit to get out, and Shigaraki seized the opportunity to grab Izuku by his hair, lifting him up with his pinky finger raised. Once Izuku was in the air, Shigaraki kicked him towards the Nomu. Izuku twisted his body midair and landed in a roll, just far enough from the other villains to charge back at Shigaraki. Izuku feinted a punch to Shigaraki's jaw but quickly ducked, raising his arms to elbow him in the gut. Shigaraki doubled over, but he retaliated with a punch. Izuku was too slow to dodge completely, and the blow struck his leg hard. He heard a crunch but knew from experience that it was Shigaraki's fist that had taken the damage, not his own leg. That was why Izuku preferred to minimize his punches. Shigaraki recovered quickly and ran towards Izuku, reaching out with his good hand. Izuku grabbed it and twisted, pinning Shigaraki's arm behind his back and forcing him to his knees. This move would break Shigaraki's arm if he tried to move, and he seemed smart enough to stay still. However, Izuku had made the crucial mistake of forgetting about Shigaraki's associates. "Kurogyri," Shigaraki said, his voice raspy. Suddenly, Izuku was enveloped in black mist and forced to release his grip on Shigaraki. He barely managed to grab the villain's shirt and threw himself forward before the portal could close. Frustrated, Shigaraki charged at Izuku again, and they both fell to the ground, exchanging jabs and locks until Izuku finally managed to put Shigaraki in a sleeper hold. It didn't take long before Shigaraki was out cold. Izuku stood up, breathing, and turned to face Azui and Hatsum, who were staring at him in shock. He cursed under his breath, realizing he had forgotten that Izuku was just an 11-year-old kid skilled with technology and not a fighter. He had revealed more than he should have. Hopefully, he could smooth things over later, especially since Erasure and the other students waiting by the door had seen everything. Just as he turned his attention back to the villains, Kurogyri struck him in the gut and warped him, sending Izuku hurtling towards the Nomu. Izuku clutched his stomach but managed to kick the Nomu in the face. It felt like kicking a brick wall, and he felt a crunch as his foot twisted painfully. He accidentally landed with too much force on his injured ankle and fell to the ground, tears threatening to spill over. The Nomu turned to him, its eyes cold and uncaring, as it lifted Izuku into the air by his arm. Just then, the doors of the building burst open, and All Might's booming voice filled the air. "It's all right now. But because I am here." All Might strode towards the villains, his jacket in hand. A few smaller villains attempted to attack him, but he vanished in an instant. The next thing Izuku knew, All Might was holding Eraserhead over his shoulder, with Izuku, Hatsum, and Azui in his arms. Izuku glanced over at the villains and saw that Kurogyri had warped away with Shigaraki while the Nomu had been sent back, its arms smoking. All Might had struck with incredible speed. As the villains recovered, he set Azui and Hatsum down, handing Izuku to Azui while Hatsum took Erasure. He instructed them to return to the others while he went to confront the Nomu. Izuku watched as All Might began trading punches with the creature. All Might grabbed the Nomu's waist and lifted it into the air before slamming it down onto the concrete. When the dust settled, the Nomu's torso and legs were stuck in the ground, separated by Kurogyri's warp gates, while All Might was held up by the Nomu's arms, blood staining his shirt. "You see," Kurogyri began, "it was the Nomu's job to contain you, and it is my job to eliminate you." As soon as the Nomu lowers you through that warp gate, I will close it around your body, and you will perish. Frustrated by 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐸𝐵's lengthy explanation, Izuku decided he couldn't let the villains have the upper hand. So what if he had a broken ankle? He had fought through worse injuries before. His pain tolerance was higher than most. Izuku wriggled out of 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸's arms and grabbed a collapsible sword from 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐵's bag before running at the villains, careful to keep weight off his injured ankle. He unfolded the weapon and stabbed the Nomu in the wrist, forcing it to release All Might. He stepped back, standing next to All Might, who was careful with his new wounds. "Young Teo, please leave this to me," All Might whispered. "But I can help you," Izuku insisted. The Nomu charged at them with tremendous speed, and they both dodged. "I'm sorry, but I cannot risk you getting hurt more than you already are," All Might explained. The Nomu suddenly appeared next to him and punched him into the fountain. All Might coughed up blood, which mixed with the water now covering the floor. The Nomu ignored Izuku and came at him again. Izuku dodged just in time, and the fountain exploded from the sheer force of the Nomu's attack. It charged at him once more, but Izuku was quicker, picking up a large piece of rubble from the fountain and throwing it at the Nomu's head. It screeched in fury and turned its attention to Izuku. Izuku cursed, realizing he hadn't thought of a plan beyond catching its attention. The Nomu ran even faster than before, barely giving Izuku enough time to evade its massive fists. The concrete beneath and in front of the beast exploded from the pressure of its movements. All Might made a critical mistake, yelling as he tried to punch the Nomu from behind, inadvertently revealing his position. The Nomu dodged and retaliated, landing a powerful blow to All Might's stomach that sent him flying. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐸 and the Nomu advanced as Izuku moved his blade into the Nomu's shoulder and kicked 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸 in the metal band around his neck with his good foot. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸 returned to defending Shigaraki after Izuku shot a glare at the unconscious villain, but in doing so, he lost sight of the Nomu. Suddenly, a fist collided with his face, snapping his head back and filling his vision with white light. If the Nomu had used its strong arm, Izuku knew he would have been finished. As the light faded, he realized his nose was broken, and blood stained his clothes. The Nomu charged again, and Izuku ducked to the side, retrieving his sword from its shoulder as he escaped its range. The creature's head turned toward All Might, who lay unconscious on the ground, and it leapt toward him. Without thinking, Izuku jumped in the way and took the hit to his chest. The sound of cracking ribs echoed in his ears, and he felt sharp pain as some bones poked out. But he couldn't stop. The safety of his classmates depended on him. Despite the pain, Izuku pressed on, ignoring the discomfort as he ran toward the Nomu. It screeched and struck his left arm just as he stabbed its neck, desperate to take down the beast. His arm shattered, but the Nomu's neck wound quickly regenerated after he pulled out the sword. Izuku noticed that its wrist had healed as well. It must be its quirk. As he processed this, he realized the Nomu had absorbed one of All Might's punches and felt like a brick wall when Izuku kicked it. It was incredibly difficult to damage. Did it have multiple quirks? His thoughts were interrupted by a punch that narrowly missed him. He ducked just in time, dropping his sword to grab its wrist with his good arm and twisting it behind its back. The Nomu was stronger, and Izuku quickly released his grip. As expected, the Nomu twisted its arm back just as Izuku moved out of reach, a move that could have been fatal. While it was distracted, Izuku dashed in, picked up his sword, and summoned all his strength to stab the back of its head, the only vulnerable spot he could reach. The creature tilted its head down, and Izuku struck just shy of his target. In retaliation, the Nomu grabbed him and tossed him like a rag doll across the plaza. Izuku hit the concrete hard, nearly losing consciousness, but the panicked cries of his classmates kept him alert. He opened his eyes to see the Nomu slowly approaching, while 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐸 watched from beside Shigaraki, who remained unconscious. 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐸𝐸 and Erasure were halfway up the massive stairs leading to the exit, along with everyone else who wasn't warped around the building. Izuku focused on them, using their presence as an anchor to keep moving. It wasn't over yet. When the Nomu reached him, Izuku sprang up and dashed behind it. His speed was diminished, but it caught the creature off guard. He turned and charged again, gripping his sword tightly, his knuckles turning white. His left arm hung limply, his shattered leg throbbed, and most of his ribs were either scraping against his lungs or protruding from his chest. Blood trickled down his head, likely from a concussion, but he refused to let that stop him. His classmates needed him, and no one else could take down the 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿. With a burst of determination, Izuku leaped higher than seemed possible in his condition and plunged the blade into the creature's brain. It emitted a strange choking sound, and blood gurgled from its throat. The 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 fell to its knees, staring into Izuku's eyes as he dropped to the ground. Beside it, there was something sad about its gaze, almost bittersweet. It seemed to have suffered greatly and was finally at rest. It was strange to see such emotion in the eyes of a creature that had come so close to ending his life, but Izuku felt certain of what he saw. After what felt like an eternity of eye contact, the 𝐻𝐻𝐻𝐿 collapsed face first onto the ground. Although only a short time had passed, it felt like ages to Izuku. His body was exhausted, and his mind was weary. He longed to go home and sleep, but he had to keep going. He felt an odd calmness mixed with fatigue, yet his instincts screamed for him to move. With great effort, Izuku turned around, his body stiff and uncooperative. His eyes darted to every detail except what he wanted to focus on. He squeezed his eyes shut and directed his head toward 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲, who was staring back at him. Moments later, Shigaraki stirred. He sat up, rubbed his head, and looked around, confusion etched on his face until his gaze landed on Izuku. Anger flashed briefly before pure joy and satisfaction took over as he observed Izuku's injuries. The boy was in no condition to fight, and there was no one left to challenge him. The other students might have been able to attack together, but fear held them back. Shigaraki grinned, commenting on Izuku's state. He mused aloud about whether to kill him first or make him watch as he eliminated everyone else. A cold sweat broke out on Izuku's forehead, and he felt a chill run down his spine as Shigaraki approached him. Izuku wanted to run, punch, scream, anything, but his body had long ceased to obey him. The only thing he could move was his gaze, watching helplessly as Shigaraki lifted his open hand towards his face. Shigaraki's fingers pressed against the edges of Izuku's face, a wide grin spreading across his features. Just as Shigaraki was about to lower his pinky, a loud bang echoed through the air. Izuku instinctively brought his arm close to him, feeling a sharp pain as blood trickled from the wound in his forearm. He was hit again, this time in the shoulder and both legs, before 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 warped them away. Shifting his gaze towards the top of the stairs and the door, relief washed over him. Every teacher at UA, including Principal Nizu, stood at the entrance. Ida stood proudly beside them, and Izuku realized he must have informed them of the situation. Students were receiving medical attention where needed and were being taken outside. Most heroes rushed down the stairs, hurrying towards any unconscious villains and students. Present Mike and Midnight dashed towards Izuku. They called out his name, and Izuku barely registered their frantic pleas for medics and their attempts to get him to respond. Everything felt painfully slow, as if sound was muted and the world around him was fuzzy. Black dots danced in his vision, and the last thing he saw before succumbing to the darkness was Midnight reaching out to catch him. Izuku woke up in an unfamiliar room. The smell and the few things he could see suggested it was a hospital or perhaps the nurse's office. His body felt sluggish, encumbered by casts on his left arm and leg, bandages covering his chest and right side, and a neck brace. He heard someone enter the room and tried to turn his head to look, but a gentle tap on his right leg stopped him. "Don't move your neck," an elderly woman exclaimed. "You're very lucky it didn't snap in half with the amount of damage your head took." She climbed onto a stool, positioning herself so Izuku didn't need to move his head to see her. It was Recovery Girl. She sighed, her voice softening with concern. "How are you feeling? You had a lot of injuries and little stamina, so I couldn't heal everything in one go. Your left arm and leg, as well as your ribs, are still broken. Your neck and head are seriously damaged." To be honest, Izuku could barely feel anything. His pain tolerance had always been above average. High pain tolerance or not, you shouldn't have been able to move after your arm shattered. An 11-year-old can't handle that kind of damage. She squinted at him, then sighed again and hopped off her seat. After checking his injuries and ensuring he didn't have a concussion or permanent brain damage, she left the room. A few hours later, she returned, gave him a healing session, removed his neck brace, and advised him to be careful with his movements. She even offered him a few gummy bears before leaving again. Izuku sat up and noticed his phone on the bedside table. He picked it up and called Mai, who was not pleased to hear about his serious injuries at school. Apparently, he had been unconscious for 4 days. After about 10 minutes of her expressing her concern and urging him to take care of himself, she hung up. He then checked the group chat. A bunch of idiots. Broccoli Bunny is online. Broccoli Bunny. Hello 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲. Broccoli Give sleep, Bunny. The very sleepy caterpillar. Are you alright? Number 47. You're awake. Kiss all better. Enough. He's probably just woken up. Broccoli Bunny. It's fine. Kiss all better. I woke up a few hours ago, but I've only been able to text you now. The very sleepy caterpillar. We heard what happened on the news. How are your injuries? Broccoli Bunny. They're fine. Ratatouille. Is that the truth, or are you just trying to make us feel better? 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐸𝐵. I give sleep. Mr. Maker. Lego brick. Number 47. Stormtrooper. Broccoli Bunny. Option 2. I give sleep. Broccoli Bunny. Tell us how many and how bad your injuries really are. Before and after you got healed. Broccoli Bunny. Well, I shattered my left arm and leg. Most of my ribs were either scratching my lungs or sticking out of my chest. I had neck and spinal damage, a broken nose, a head wound, and I dislocated my right ankle at some point. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲. I give sleep. Number 47. Mr. Maker. Ratatouille. Stormtrooper. Lego brick. Rip-off 𝐹. The very sleepy caterpillar. Gimme rice. Stormtrooper. Vampire wannabe. Broccoli Bunny. I'm mostly healed though. My arm and leg should be good to use in 2 or 3 days. My ribs are all in the correct places, and I don't have any permanent head or spine damage. Number 47. How long have you been asleep? Broccoli Bunny. I heard it was around 4 days. Kiss or better. Wait, I have a better question. How did you even get those injuries? Broccoli Bunny. Magic. Kiss or better, Bunny. The very sleepy caterpillar. You better tell us. Correction. You better tell her. Broccoli Bunny. Well, all 3 of the teachers were down, and I didn't want the other students getting hurt, so. Kiss all better. And your answer to that was to break just about every bone in your body. Broccoli Bunny. Okay, the idea sounded better at the time. The very sleepy caterpillar. How many villains did you fight? Please tell me it was just one of the small timers. Broccoli Bunny. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲. Bunny, we're begging you, please say it was just one of the small timers. Broccoli Bunny. It may or may not have been 3 villains. I give sleep. 3 of the small timers. Broccoli Bunny. The very sleepy caterpillar. Problem child. Tell me, who did you fight to get that beaten up? Broccoli Bunny. There were 3 villains who were slightly stronger than the others. Number 47. You mean the 3 villains that took down Eraserhead, one of whom was engineered to be able to defeat All Might? 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲 was taken aback, exclaiming in disbelief. Rip-off 𝐹 declared that the bunny was finished. Lego Brick asked if they had won. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲 pointed out that the question should be different. Broccoli Bunny confirmed they had won, albeit in a roundabout way. They explained that they had managed to defeat one opponent and temporarily incapacitate another, crediting Snipe for saving their life. Number 47 expressed surprise, while Ratatouille insisted on staying on topic. Broccoli Bunny admitted they had been caught. The very sleepy caterpillar noted how easily the others had taken down Erasure and inquired about Broccoli Bunny's fighting skills. Broccoli Bunny shrugged, claiming they had learned nowhere in particular. 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲 urged them to share more, while 𝐒𝐮𝐸𝐵𝐲 cautioned against ignoring her. Broccoli Bunny suggested leaving it at having their own methods. The very sleepy caterpillar refused to let it go, and Ratatouille warned that they had their own ways of uncovering secrets. Broccoli Bunny hesitated, stating that revealing too much would jeopardize their trust. I Give Sleep pleaded for them to share, assuring that their secret would be safe. Broccoli Bunny found this hard to believe, but eventually relented, warning that any fuss would ruin their trust forever. They mentioned the vigilante Oleander, who was unknown to most of the group. The very sleepy caterpillar revealed they had heard of him, surprising Broccoli Bunny, who thought he was a mystery. The very sleepy caterpillar explained that they had their own sources of information. Broccoli Bunny hinted that they might be the vigilante in question. The group reacted with disbelief, questioning how many times a person could face danger in a day. 𝐼𝐺𝐸 asked about Oleander's reputation, while the very sleepy caterpillar clarified that he had significantly reduced crime in his area. They mentioned that only a few civilians had seen him, often in dire circumstances, but he had never lost a fight. Broccoli Bunny acknowledged the rumors but admitted to having faced many defeats. WhatIf speculated about bullying being a factor in Broccoli Bunny's choice to become a vigilante. Broccoli Bunny explained that it was more complicated, stemming from the loss of their father and being left homeless by their mother. They had spent months searching for a place to belong before finding the cafe where they now worked, revealing the harsh realities that often went unnoticed by heroes. They concluded that vigilantism had become an addiction, as they continued even after starting their job. Meanwhile, Izuku heard footsteps approaching his room, followed by Recovery Girl's urgent voice and another he couldn't identify. The commotion grew, and he realized that Recovery Girl was struggling to keep someone out of the sick bay. To his surprise, Eraser and his group burst in, with Recovery Girl trying to usher them away. Eraser called out to Izuku, who was taken aback by the sudden intrusion. Midnight asked if he was all right, using a nickname that startled him. Realizing the chat had revealed his identity, Izuku felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. Overwhelmed by their gazes, he made a hasty decision and jumped out of the window. Eraser quickly caught him by his scarf, pulling him back inside with a disappointed look. Present Mike commented on Izuku's reckless action, while Midnight confirmed it had indeed happened. Recovery Girl scolded Izuku for his impulsiveness, insisting he should not be jumping out of windows while injured. Nizu, bewildered, questioned why Izuku had thrown himself out in the first place. Izuku admitted it was due to embarrassment over things he had said in the chat, particularly regarding Eraserhead. The atmosphere lightened slightly as Present Mike reassured him that it was fine. However, the mood shifted when Eraser asked about Izuku's past, specifically his experience of being homeless. Izuku explained that the woman he worked with at the cafe, Mai, could not adopt him due to her own troubled history. She had pretended to be his aunt to protect him from potential abuse in the foster system. Eraser pressed further, asking where Izuku lived, to which Izuku replied that he had found an abandoned apartment. The group fell silent, processing the gravity of his situation. Eraser finally asked if Mai's reluctance to let anyone adopt him was solely to prevent him from ending up with bad parents. Izuku nodded, feeling a mix of confusion and shock. The idea of being adopted was something he never expected. He wondered if it was really true. Would this person truly adopt him? He was still trying to process it all. The man explained that he cared about him and wanted to provide him with a home. Izuku struggled to understand why someone would want to help him when he felt so useless. The man reassured him that not everything was about personal gain. Sometimes, it was simply about helping others. Despite his confusion, Izuku agreed to the adoption. The man, known as Eraser, pulled out a stack of papers and a pen, ready for the formalities. Izuku was surprised that he had those documents on hand, but he signed them anyway, officially becoming Aizawa Izuku. In the following days, Recovery Girl insisted that Izuku rest in bed. He had no idea why she was so adamant about keeping him from jumping out of windows, but he was mostly okay with it. Many staff members visited him, and Present Mike and Midnight were particularly excited about the adoption. Izuku found himself worrying about how to explain this change to his friends, especially Mai. He decided it would be easier to tell her first and keep it from his classmates for the time being. The thought of facing Kaken filled him with dread, as he suspected that Eraser or Nizu would eventually make him confront him. He also worried about who knew about his quirklessness, fearing that if Eraser found out, he might abandon him. Once Recovery Girl gave him the go-ahead, Izuku had to stay home for 2 days before returning to class. He wished he could go back to his own home, but now that he was an Aizawa, that was no longer an option. However, he was allowed to make a quick stop at his old place to collect personal items. This led him to sit in Eraser's car with present Mike as they drove to an abandoned apartment not far from the school. The drive felt long, and when they arrived, Mike helped Izuku out of the car since he was still recovering from his injuries. Together, they made their way into the old building and up to the 4th floor, where Izuku had lived. Erasure and Mike looked around the building with a hint of sadness in their eyes, though Izuku couldn't quite understand why. When they reached the apartment, Izuku asked Mike to help him retrieve a hidden key. He unlocked the door and gestured for Izuku to enter first. As he stepped inside, he carefully checked that his belongings were still there, including his laptop and various projects. He sat on the floor, pulling away some boards to retrieve his costume and other essentials, packing them into his backpack. Once he was ready, he told them it was time to go. Mike asked if that was everything, and after a brief moment of confusion, they left for Eraser's house. It was a simple 2-story home painted pale blue with white accents, nothing fancy, which Izuku appreciated. Since it was late, Mike began preparing dinner while Erasure showed Izuku his new room. It was modest, with a bed, a small table, and a closet. Izuku was content, but he sensed that Erasure was not entirely satisfied. After putting away his things, Izuku made his way downstairs, where he found Mike and Erasure chatting. Their camaraderie reminded him of brothers, and he felt a pang of jealousy. They had known each other for years, while he had only managed to form a few fleeting connections. Erasure noticed him and invited him to sit at the table. They sat in silence until they noticed smoke wafting from the kitchen. Both tried to get up to help Mike, but Erasure was quicker, rushing in with his scarf flowing behind him. When Izuku finally reached the kitchen, he saw Mike standing next to the oven, which was still smoking, holding a muffin tin filled with quiches. Erasure looked at him with disappointment as Izuku hobbled over, noticing that the food was both burnt and undercooked. Mike suggested that the oven might be broken, and Erasure sighed, sending Izuku back to the table while he assisted Mike in salvaging the meal. Izuku found their interactions amusing. Soon, Mike emerged from the kitchen with Erasure ensuring he didn't drop the plate. They all sat down to dinner, and Izuku quietly observed their conversation, feeling somewhat out of place. Eventually, Erasure included him in the discussion, asking if he was hungry. Izuku felt a bit confused by the question, but it made more sense when he noticed the single quiche he had barely touched. He had probably eaten less than half of it. He usually didn't eat much, just a small lunch at the cafe, and he smiled as he explained this. The two heroes exchanged concerned glances, leaving Izuku puzzled. Erasure suggested they should encourage him to eat more, and Izuku nodded in agreement, realizing it was late and he should get some rest. It had been a rather confusing day. When Izuku woke up, panic set in as he momentarily forgot he was at Eraser's house. In his flustered state, he flailed and accidentally fell out of bed with a thud. Erasure and Mike rushed into the room, with Mike helping Izuku sit up. Still panicking, Izuku inadvertently hit Mike in the face with his cast, prompting a startled yell. Thankfully, Erasure had already erased his quirk, preventing any further chaos. With a sigh, Erasure told Izuku to calm down and checked on Mike, who assured them he was fine. Izuku apologized profusely for waking them and for the accidental hit. Erasure informed him it was past midday, leaving Izuku momentarily stunned. He had gone to sleep at a reasonable hour and somehow slept far longer than usual. It was baffling, and as he processed this, Erasure mentioned they would make lunch before leaving the room. After a few minutes, Izuku finally got out of bed and went to his closet to grab his only pair of clothes that weren't pajamas, uniforms, or his vigilante costume. He headed to the bathroom across the hall to change and took a quick shower. It was a bit unusual as he typically showered using rainwater he collected, especially during the summer. After a brief shower with warm water and soap, Izuku looked noticeably different. His curly hair was softer and silkier, and his skin was cleaner and smoother, making him resemble a typical 11-year-old who looked well cared for. When he went downstairs, he found a scene similar to the previous night, but this time it was pancakes instead of quiches. Erasure and Mike were chatting amiably, their voices occasionally rising as they discussed various topics, which Izuku found comforting. He quietly took a seat at the table, hoping to go unnoticed for as long as possible. Their conversation came to an end when Mike flipped the last pancake onto a large plate and brought it to the table along with plates, cutlery, and toppings. There was maple syrup, lemon slices, sugar, Nutella, yogurt, cream, and a small bowl of mixed berries. Izuku thought it was a bit extravagant but was grateful nonetheless. Mike encouraged him to serve himself, and Izuku took one pancake, squeezing lemon juice and sprinkling raw sugar on top. It was delicious, even if he only managed to eat half before feeling full. Once everyone had eaten their fill, Erasure having 2 pancakes and Mike devouring the rest, including Izuku's half, Erasure informed Izuku to be ready to leave the house in 10 minutes while Mike cleaned up. They were going shopping, just the 3 of them, which explained why they encountered Midnight at the mall. As they arrived, Midnight greeted them enthusiastically. Mike smiled while Erasure groaned, and Izuku, unsure of how to react, mimicked a classmate with distinctive hair. Mike called back to Midnight, and she approached them, wrapping her arm around Mick's shoulder and speaking softly to Izuku. The 4 of them made their way through the mall, visiting various shops. Their first stop was a children's clothing store, as Izuku had only 4 pairs of clothing, including his Vigilante costume. Trying on clothes was a challenge with his arm and leg in casts. Initially, Izuku aimed for the cheapest options, but Midnight's knack for spotting the most expensive items made that difficult. However, Izuku didn't mind when it came to hero merchandise, especially posters and figurines, ensuring he would have space for the Eraserhead posters he planned to create later. Next, they shopped for school supplies. Though Izuku had his own money, he could only afford second-hand items, as he needed to save for food and other essentials. He picked out a new backpack, pencil case, water bottle, and a few notebooks since his was nearly full. Their final stop was furniture, where Midnight and Mike seemed to go a bit overboard. They ended up with a clover-patterned rug, a hammock, new bed sheets, a desk with a chair, and several other items. Overall, the day was going splendidly until someone recognized Mike and Midnight, then turned to Izuku and asked if he was their child. Everyone froze in shock, and more people began to crowd around, making it difficult to clarify that none of them were married and that Izuku wasn't related to any of them. Erasure stood off to the side, smirking at their discomfort. By the end of the day, Izuku was worn out from shopping and simply flopped onto the bed, skipping dinner since he wasn't hungry. When Izuku fell asleep, he repeatedly reassured himself that he would be safe waking up in Erasure's house. However, that didn't work at all. He nearly threw himself out of a window and probably wouldn't have landed safely if Erasure and Mike hadn't come in at the right moment. After everyone, mostly Izuku, calmed down, the 2 pro heroes went downstairs. Izuku took a shower before joining them, changing into a sage green t-shirt that humorously stated "t-shirt" and jeans. It felt nice to have more than one outfit to wear in his daily life. Izuku woke up at the much more reasonable time of 4 in the morning. Erasure looked extra grumpy, likely due to waking up early and having to return to class the next day. Izuku's mood dropped slightly upon realizing he had to do the same, but he pushed it aside and ate a small breakfast of fruit and coffee, missing the taste of coffee dearly. Erasure, Mike, and Izuku all had a chance to relax at home before returning to the chaos of school. Overall, it was a pretty chill day. Izuku stayed in his room without anyone disturbing him, except for reminders to eat something, which he appreciated since he had missed nearly a week of scouting out villains on his laptop. It was also a missed week of vigilante work, and Izuku knew he needed to start going out again soon, otherwise, the villains would become too bold and cause even more trouble. He didn't need additional chaos while recovering, especially since Recovery Girl had made it clear he couldn't remove his casts or sling without adult supervision, which would hinder his work and risk revealing his identity. Izuku had to ignore the nagging feeling that he needed to help people no matter what, which was definitely not easy. He attempted to distract himself with a certain group chat. In the group chat titled, "A Bunch of Idiots," Broccoli Bunny greeted everyone with a good morning and asked if anyone was around. Mr. Maker quickly responded, calling out to Izuku, while number 47 inquired about his absence. Ratatouille expressed concern for Izuku's well-being, and Screech noted that it seemed he did care. Ratatouille humorously threatened anyone who denied it. Broccoli Bunny requested that Nizu-san refrain from making threats, to which Ratatouille replied with a vague promise. 𝐼𝐼 asked Izuku how he was feeling, and he responded that he was fine, barely feeling anything at that point. 𝐒𝐮𝐦𝐦𝐚𝐫𝐲 better clarified whether he meant his injuries or pain in general, to which Izuku confirmed it was the latter. The very sleepy caterpillar playfully called Izuku a problem child, and when Izuku acknowledged him, he was reminded to share such things earlier. The conversation continued with a light-hearted exchange about names and feelings, with Ratatouille advising Izuku to get some rest since it was getting late. Broccoli Bunny was surprised to learn it was almost past midnight and decided to say goodnight before logging off. Izuku glanced at the new alarm clock on his desk and realized it was nearly 1 in the morning. He quickly set it for 7 a.m. and tried his best to fall asleep, but it was challenging as he involuntarily began to revert to his usual sleep schedule. The next morning, Izuku woke up to his alarm and got up without falling off the bed. He followed his routine of showering, getting dressed in his uniform, and heading downstairs for breakfast. Mike was cooking bacon and eggs while 2 coffees and a tea sat on the table with Shota. Shota nodded to Izuku, who returned the gesture before sitting next to him. Despite still having casts and his arm in a sling, Izuku managed without his crutch. Shota greeted him as problem child, and Izuku groggily returned the greeting, still half asleep despite the hot shower. Mike joined them with plates of food, and Izuku took a plate, managing to eat a piece of bacon but feeling he couldn't eat more. He was still adjusting to having more than one meal and hoped it wouldn't take long to adapt, especially since Mick's cooking was surprisingly good. After finishing breakfast, they all hopped into Shota's car, and Mike drove them to UA. Once they arrived, they went their separate ways to their respective classrooms. Izuku tried to sneak into class unnoticed, but as soon as his classmates recognized him, they either celebrated, looked at him with pity, or offered sympathy. Not used to being the center of attention, he focused on getting to his seat without engaging with anyone. Fortunately, his classmates seemed to understand his longing for solitude and quietly returned to their seats when Majima-sensei entered the room. He greeted the class, who responded in kind, and then began discussing lab rules, mentioning the incident that had occurred while Izuku was away, prompting some students to snicker. But since Izuku knew Hatsune, even if only a little, he was pretty sure it wasn't them who did it. He finished mentioning the upcoming sports festival and left the students to their next teacher. Ectoplasm arrived to teach math, discussing converting fractions to decimals to percentages, something everyone had already learned. He explained it again since some students were struggling, but Izuku didn't pay much attention and decided to focus on the sports festival instead. Izuku knew he could recover from his injuries before then, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to win. It would be a huge achievement, and he would love to have that kind of accomplishment, but he didn't want the attention that came with it. He also didn't want to risk revealing more of his skills and have students start asking questions. He was confident the teachers would cover for him, but teenagers could be quite persistent. It was also risky to show off since any villains who had heard of him or, worse, had seen his moves could recognize him, and his secret would be at risk. The potential dangers outweighed the benefits, so it would be better to lay low. Ectoplasm began handing out papers, and Izuku's mind snapped back to attention. He completed the worksheet in record time and waited for the extra work he knew the teacher had for him. As soon as he dropped his pencil, a second sheet appeared on his desk, and he grinned at the topic. It was an enjoyable one, but Izuku still finished early. Izuku wanted to start training for the sports festival as soon as he got home, but Mike quickly shot down the idea, knowing Recovery Girl would be furious if she found out Izuku was training with his casts on. Izuku was certain he didn't need them anymore, but she tended to be overly cautious with both him and Erasure. It seemed she would keep someone in a wheelchair for a month over a stubbed toe, and there was no escaping her care. So, Izuku came up with a plan that his 11-year-old mind could devise. He would learn how to remove a cast by himself and put it back on later without anyone noticing. It helped that he finished his homework quicker than usual, giving him an excuse to stay in his room, and he had a basic understanding of casts from experience. This knowledge made the process much quicker. After about half an hour, Izuku figured out how to safely remove a cast on his own. Now he just had to learn how to do it quietly, which took a bit more effort since not many people needed to remove a cast without making noise. However, he managed it. By the time he figured out the last step of putting the cast back on and erasing any signs of tampering, Mike called him down for dinner. Izuku closed his laptop and placed it on his bedside table, contemplating whether it was a good thing he was starting to get used to the routine he had developed while staying there. He quickly forgot about that thought when he saw 3 bowls of katsudon on the table, one of which he assumed was his since it was significantly smaller. Getting used to living there was fine. It was definitely safer than an abandoned apartment. He had had several run-ins with villains on the run or homeless individuals who were more than willing to fight for territory. Not to mention, he didn't know how to handle injuries. He was also healthier here. He had been eating more and managing to get more than 4 hours of sleep each night, although his sleep schedule still needed adjustment, especially since he was creating a new one starting tonight. The 3 of them enjoyed dinner, which was delicious, and Izuku loved it, while Mike mostly ranted about his students. Izuku let Mike take his dishes when he was done before announcing that he was off to bed. Shota looked a bit skeptical, aware of Izuku's previous sleep schedule, but Izuku simply mentioned that ectoplasm and Cementos had given him extra homework. They had, but he finished early anyway. Shota didn't need to know that. Izuku did a little bit of hacking to check the crime rates in his territory to ensure nobody was getting too bold. However, everyone seemed to assume Oleander was dead, and the number of thugs and villains had exploded. Izuku mentally groaned, realizing he would have to work overtime. He sighed before putting his laptop away, setting an alarm on his phone, and ensuring he had an earbud in so only he could hear it when it went off. Izuku then went to bed, doing his best to fall asleep, pleasantly surprised when his body actually listened to him for once. There were 21 of these all over the house. The second photo was apparently her favorite, which was no surprise. Izuku woke up at 1 in the morning to the blaring of his alarm. He had forgotten to check the volume. After his ear recovered, he went to his closet and grabbed his vigilante costume. Shota and Mike had intended to take it away from him to keep him safe, but Izuku had told them he left it at his old apartment and secretly hid it in the closet. He also concealed a decoy there, just in case they went looking, ensuring that anyone who might find it would think he was out of commission. Oleander wasn't really in the news or articles, so it was possible that whoever found it would just think he was a weirdo. Izuku quietly removed both of his casts and hid them under his bed before changing into his costume. It felt good to wear it again. He did some stretches to avoid pulling a muscle, as his arm and leg had been immobilized for so long, and opened the window. He stood there for a moment, enjoying the fresh breeze on his face, before jumping down into the darkness. He wandered around a bit before putting on his mask, not wanting to be seen leaving a pro-hero's house. Even though Shota was underground and no one knew his address, Izuku wasn't taking any chances. It only took a few minutes for him to find a mugging in an alley. The victim was a young woman, likely on her way home from a bar, and the villain was a tall, muscular man holding a large kitchen knife. As the man lunged at the woman, Izuku reacted quickly, jumping in the way and deflecting the knife with his own hand. The attacker looked startled, and Izuku seized the opportunity to sweep his legs out from under him, knocking him out with a swift motion. The man crumpled to the ground. Izuku turned back to the woman, ensuring she was unharmed before climbing up the fire escape. He called out to her to contact the police before the villain regained consciousness. With tears in her eyes, she did as instructed, but Izuku's attention was drawn away by another scream a few buildings away. He rushed toward it and found a group of 4 villains cornering a mother and her 5-year-old child. Izuku quickly resolved that situation and moved on. In just 1 hour, Izuku had intervened in 23 incidents. It was surprising, considering he usually only encountered 4 or 5, maybe 18 at most during a full shift. He dashed around the area, saving people and taking down villains left and right. The police station was going to have a busy night. By the end of the 4 hours he had allocated for vigilante work, he had resolved 97 situations. 97. Oleander had only been gone for a week. Izuku decided that another hour would be fine, and he ended up staying out past 5. 5.5 hours of vigilante work was exhausting, but Izuku needed to make it clear that Oleander was back, and 128 resolved situations would certainly send that message. On his way home, he took off his mask and tucked it into his hoodie to avoid drawing attention. He climbed through his bedroom window and changed out of his vigilante costume, collapsing onto his bed as soon as everything was hidden, his casts in their proper places, and he was in his pajamas. The adrenaline was likely the only reason he had managed to stay awake after a week of inactivity, so he wasn't surprised. When Izuku woke up, neither Shota nor Present Mike seemed to know about his nighttime activities. They didn't mention it or hint at it, so he assumed he was in the clear to do it again. Once more, Izuku woke up at 1 in the morning, this time remembering to lower the volume on his alarm. He quickly removed his casts, finding it easier since he had done it before, and set them aside before changing into his vigilante costume, minus the mask, and climbing out the window. As he walked around, he kept an eye out for danger, getting deeper into his territory before donning his mask. It seemed that the previous night had taken its toll, as he could only find the usual amount of villains this time. Izuku managed to stop 9 incidents, which was pretty average for the first 2 hours. He continued searching, growing anxious when he struggled to find anyone else, let alone a villain. After half an hour of listening carefully and leaping from building to building, he found himself completely alone on the streets, which frightened him more than any confrontation. He was certain this silence was intentional, and the longer he went without sensing even a rat scurrying about, the more on edge he became. Cold sweat began to form on his face beneath the mask covering the lower half of his face, the hair on his neck standing on end as his breath quickened. He pulled out 2 knives, adopting a cautious stance as he prowled the streets, moving slowly and ready to fight at a moment's notice. His eyes scanned every detail, his ears catching every tiny sound, and he could practically feel the shifts in the air as he moved. Everything about the situation screamed danger and panic, making Izuku want to curl up in a tight ball. Eventually, he decided the pressure was too much and turned to head back to Shota's house when he noticed black mist filling the air in front of him. Izuku flinched as a pale hand emerged from the swirling darkness, followed by a face that was even paler. Shigaraki Tamura grinned behind the petrified hand, while Kurogyari shaped himself into a more human-like form beside him. His scratchy voice broke the silence as he suggested a friendly chat. Izuku stiffened at the proposal but forced himself into a better stance, chuckling at his own reaction as Kurogyari enveloped them in a dome of mist. 3 hours passed as Izuku fought against Kurogyari and Shigaraki. Recovery Girl had a valid reason for insisting that Izuku keep his casts on, even though he was fully healed. It was to prevent him from engaging in fights until he regained all his strength. From his experience at USJ, Izuku knew that such a confrontation should have lasted only a few minutes and ended with 2 new villains in Tartarus. Yet, it took 3 hours, and he hadn't apprehended either of them. In the end, neither side sustained major injuries, and Kurogyari unexpectedly warped both of them away. Izuku waited for a while, expecting them to return and attack again, but after some time, he realized they weren't coming back and decided to head home. He climbed up the side of the house and entered through the window, noticing that the lights were on, even though they hadn't been when he left. His mind didn't register this fact until he spotted Shota leaning against the door with his arms crossed, his gaze fixed intently on Izuku. "Problem child," he remarked, his tone heavy with disapproval. As the night unfolded, Izuku's friends exchanged messages about his late-night activities. One of them noted that he had been sneaking into his bedroom after vigilante work. Concern grew among the group as they discussed the potential dangers of his actions. They were aware that Izuku had only recently returned to the streets, and the crime rate in his area had surged in his absence. The group expressed their worries, realizing that the situation had escalated beyond what they had anticipated. Izuku, reflecting on his past encounters, began to understand the gravity of the situation. Despite his earlier successes in apprehending numerous villains, he now recognized that the stakes had risen significantly. So much had happened in